Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I have a fun project with a lot of different techniques. We're going to use a bunch of different supplies, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I'm hoping that the project that we do today is going to help you look at your supplies in a new way and come up with some new ideas to use them, and maybe see if you want to try a few different techniques the next time you sit down to make a card. So both of these cards were done with the exact same techniques and a lot of the same supplies. When you're looking through your stamp stash, or when you're considering adding stamps to your stamp stash, you want to make sure that you choose things that are going to make your other stamps more versatile. So today I'm going to be showing you how to emboss with these peg stamps. These peg stamps come from our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them at pegstamps.com, and if you use the coupon code TREES, you can save 10% off of your mounted stamp order. I'll put all of that information in the video description, as well as links to the different products that I'm using. I've been stamping for a long time, so I have a lot of stamps. I have big stamps known as background stamps, which are really handy if you want to make your own pattern paper and not have to rely on what's in the store or run out to the store if you need a pattern. I also have a lot of image stamps, such as trees, and I've got big ones and little ones, all different size ones, and I want to show you kind of how they can be a little more versatile, especially with your peg stamps, since a lot of times your peg stamps will have flowers and fruit and leaves and things like that that you can hang from different tree stamps. This stamp set right here I picked up in a big box store probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I love the size of this tree. Something this big you could put on a scrapbook layout, and it would be a beautiful first day of school card with apples, kind of like we did on this bookmark, or apple picking card. Or you can do what I did here. Since I wanted to do a card or bookmark, I just stamped a portion of it in there. You could even just stamp the swirls and make a border with it. So look at your stamps and find different ways that you can use them. This smaller tree, which we're going to use on our Christmas card here, is ideal for doing different themes around seasonal things. You could do like a happy anniversary card and do flowers and leaves. You could do a new baby card. You could do thinking of you, thank you, happy birthday, any sort of card with these. I love nature images because I think that they are so versatile. So I think because both of these have the exact same supplies, this one goes into a little bit of a holiday theme, and we do a little bit extra techniques on it. We're going to do this one together, and I'm going to show you kind of how you can use embossing powders and stamps you already have with peg stamps from Rubber Stamp Tapestry. So the first thing we're going to do is stamp our background on our card. Now, if you don't have any big background stamps or you don't want to bother with it, you could totally just put down a panel of pattern paper. But if you've already invested in ink and stamps, it's a really great way to get a little more mileage. So what I've done is I just took half a sheet of cardstock and folded it in half and just creased it down with my bone folder to make it nice and flat. So what I have here is a big background stamp, and I'm going to ink this one up in kind of like a rose color. It's not like a really pinky pink, it's more of like a light red. It's kind of like corally pink, I guess, but it's going to be kind of the red in our red and green Christmas background here. So this is just a swirl. I'm going to ink this up, and I'm going to stamp this all over my background here. Hopefully get all the way to the edge. Oh, good. It's a little bit bigger than a basic card size, so that's kind of handy. Now, sometimes if you don't have a big mount, your stamp's too big, or sometimes like with the wood stamps, you don't get a very good impression. This one has like a plasticky coating on the back, and it always falls off of my mount. So what I do in that case is I actually just lay it down on my work surface, and then I ink it up with my ink pad. Just make sure you got it nice and shiny. Although, if it doesn't stamp perfectly, it's not a big deal because we're using so many different stamps here. And then you want to have a scrap of, just a sheet of scrap paper handy. Set this right down. And this just keeps your hands from getting all inky, because you don't want to get ink on your hands and then transfer it to another part of your card. And then we get that layer. So now we've got a very interesting background here already. And then to add another color in, I think I will use some green. And again, I'm using a very soft colored green because I don't want all of my colors to compete with each other. And when I'm putting a stamp onto a big block like this, what I do is I lay it down rubber side down, and I just rock it on. There. I like this mount because a lot of my other mounts don't fit these stamps. I do use my cutting pad sometimes as a stamp mount, but I kind of enjoy the handle that's on this. This is called a mega mount. I'm going to ink this up. Now I learned this technique from a demonstrator at a stamp show that was demonstrating for the company Impression Obsession, and she was just fantastic, and she made so many cool backgrounds like this with different background stamps. I thought it was such a wonderful way to get more out of your supplies. And then no matter what, whatever color you like the most, whether it be red, brown, or green, whichever one you want to accent, I think I'll do the green because that's what I did on the other card. You can just kind of drag it along the edges and pull in a little bit more color, and you can do that with whatever color you like best or whatever color you don't think there's as much of, and that just kind of balances things out. But now we have this beautiful paper that looks like we went out and bought a gorgeous decorative paper, and look at that, we didn't add an extra layer, we didn't add extra weight for postage, we just did it with what we had. Look at your stamps, see what you have that have interesting textures. You could even like ink up a piece of saran wrap and tap it down a few times, or sponge some ink on there, whatever you want to do. Find found object textures if you don't have commercially made rubber stamps, and make some cool backgrounds because it stretches your creativity, and it's good for the pocketbook too. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is work on a colored panel. This is Kraft cardstock, and I like this technique we're going to do here because it allows you to work on darker colored papers. So what we're going to do is we're going to first ink up our tree stamp with a nice dark brown ink, and just head it right here because I was using that with using the same brown I used with my music stamp. I'm going to stamp this right down here in the middle. Try to just make the trunk fairly straight. Give it a second for the ink to transfer. And I'm stamping on a padded newsprint, which is also a tip that I got from that same demonstrator at the Impression Obsession booth at a stamp show. And then I found this to be a little bit faint. So what you can do, and actually if you don't have a tree stamp, you can totally go in there and just freehand it in there with a marker. Not a big deal. Or you could even print out like a tree clip art from the internet. Whatever you want to do is fine. I'm thickening up some of these branches because they're a little thin, and I don't have to worry about leaving space for my stamping because when we emboss, our embossing powder is actually a bit opaque, so we're not going to have any trouble there. Before I emboss though, I'm going to take this little, it's basically just a piece of cloth. I put some cornstarch in there, and then I bunched it up and put a rubber band around it, so it's basically just puts out a very fine layer of cornstarch or baby powder, whatever you have, any sort of talcum, anything. And that's going to dry the ink underneath and keep my embossing powder from sticking anywhere I don't want it to stick. So the stamps I'm going to use are the same stamps we used last week, Embellished Holiday Wreath. I love this stamp set. I think it's so pretty. And I'm going to start with my biggest stamp, of course, this big ornament. And I'm going to be embossing it with this pretty glittery aqua color. You know me, I love aqua and red for Christmas, but I love it because it's got a little sparkle in it. And these embossing powders in small little vials like this, big box craft stores carry them. I think I got these at Joann's in an assortment, but you can also get, if you just want to get like one color at a time and build your stash slowly, you can do that too. Rubber Stamp Tapestry does have some high quality embossing powders, and I'll link those up below. And that way, if you don't have any yet, it's a great place to start. Since the embossing powder is opaque, it doesn't really matter what color ink I use, so I'm just going to use this light green because it's the closest one I have out to aqua. Now this ink is pigment ink. It is slow drying, it has glycerin in it, and it's sticky, so it's going to grab my ink when I go to sprinkle it on. So when you're going to emboss, what you want to do is make sure your stamp is well inked, and you're going to stamp your stamp a couple of times, however many times you want. But if you have a really large area to do, you don't want to stamp too much ahead of time because your ink will dry on you. So now what I'm going to do is grab that scrap of paper that I had earlier, put this down on my paper, and you'll see why. I'm going to dump some of this powder on there, and I'm doing it over this paper, so if I drop some, I'm not going to waste it. It'll go on the paper and I can pour it back in the vial. Okay, so even though I use my little powder thing, my powder tool to dry up the ink, I still see some stray powder stuck onto my paper. So what I'm going to do is just grab one of my soft watercolor brushes, and this isn't going to hurt my brush. I'm just going to brush off any of the, I brushed too much off there, so I'm going to put a little more back. I'm going to brush off any of the stray powder that I don't want. Okay, so now before I add any other colors or any other stamping, I need to heat this. And the heat from the heat gun is going to melt the powder and give us a nice glossy effect. Okay, so now we can see that's nice and opaque. It shows up really well. Now, since this is such a really light color, what I can do, first I'm going to take care of my embossing powder before I tip it over and make a mess or anything. So what I do here is I just put my little container down there. The only thing I don't like about these is they're very tippy because they're tall and skinny. The pots of embossing powder at Rubber Stamp Tapestry are a little bit more squat and stable. So that's something that's nice. These little bargain ones were just... They're tippy, so you got to be careful. I have spilled them before. So what I'm going to do now is just grab a marker, and I can go and I can add some dots or stripes or whatever I want with these, because I just went a little over. Don't do that. But I can decorate them a little bit. And I could, if I did them in white, I could do all sorts of colors. So I just put a couple stripes on there just to keep it easy. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go on in another color. It's also a good idea, because I got a little dust on that ink pad. It's a good idea to cap up your ink pads when you're doing the embossing so you don't get them where you don't want them. So the next color I'm going to do is green, and I am going to use, I think I'll use this one right here. And I'll just stamp it in this darker ink. Make sure you get it covered really well. And I'm going to put in a few of these. And again, we're going to grab our embossing powder. This time I have this nice Christmas green. Now, I have had really good luck with my embossing powder lasting me. I always store it in its original container, and I keep it tightly capped up. And it's stored in my basement, so I don't have a lot of, you know, it gets cooler in the winter, but I have a dehumidifier running. It's not terribly humid. It's not hot. I think as long as you have it in a fairly controlled environment that doesn't get too hot or too humid, then the powder will stay fine for you. But you definitely want to, if you're going to store it for a long period of time, cap it up. If you're using like clear or white or something you use all the time, it's fine to keep it in a little dish covered dish nearby. But if you're not going to go through a certain color rapidly, then I would definitely store it in their original containers so they don't go bad. I'm going to heat this one up, and then we'll go on to the red. You just want to make sure you're stamping with a slow drying ink like this this pigment ink. It doesn't really matter what brand you use or what color. You can just get one pad of clear embossing ink, and that'll be just fine. It's just a little bit easier for me to explain to you on camera if you can see what I'm doing. So that's why I'm using a colored ink. You don't have to at all though. So this way you can at least see a little bit what I'm doing here. And I think that's pretty good for that. And we're going to, again, go with our red powder this time. I love this color. This is Holly Red. And you can, not all embossing powders are opaque. You could get, like, if you already had, like, a ton of pigment stamp pads, or you had already had, a bunch of pigment inks, and you didn't want to buy all the embossing powder colors, you could just buy clear. It won't be opaque, obviously. It's going to show whatever you've embossed. So if you put like a red stamp on top of something black, and you'd see that black line, when you embossed it, you'd still see that black line because you'd be putting clear on top of it. But it's another option for you. Now, I didn't have a star stamp, but I thought it would be really pretty to do a bow on top of the of my tree here. So I'm going to do that in gold. I think I'll just ink it up in this yellow color here, because I know it's going to be covered up when I go to emboss it. And I'm going to look at the registration mark, make sure that I've got that lined up with my tree trunk, so my bow will be on top of the tree. And I am going to put some gold powder on that. I'll heat that up, and then I'm going to show you a fun border technique. This embossing powder is called gold tinsel because it has bits of glitter in there. Isn't that pretty? Alright, so I want to show you about the clear ink pads, how you can use those. Of course you can stamp with them, but another technique I really love is to do a frame. And so what I do is I just smoosh it against the edge of my panel, and it's going to give me a really pretty frame because it's going to grab the powder. Now I can brush off, and I like to do this with clear because if I decide that when I sprinkle it that I've got too much on there, I can brush it off, and then I don't have to have all that. It'll dry clear, so I don't have to have if I did this with red or something, then if I brushed off the powder, then you'd see red ink under there. So this just gives me that versatility. Like here, I'm like, oh boy, I've got way too much there. So what I'm going to do is just take my brush and brush some of that off. And I want to make sure it's got a little natural rough looking edge, so I'm going to take care of that just like that. All right, now I'm going to heat this. Okay, and now I am going to pick up my workstation before we go on to the next step, and we can set this aside to cool. I want to make some embellishments for my card, and this is a very inexpensive way to do it. I am just going to punch out a square, and this is actually a postage stamp punch. If you don't have that, just punch a regular square or cut it out with your paper trimmer. Not a big deal. And I actually put a couple Post-it notes together so I can make a little bit of a mask. So I'm going to stick that down, and then I like to hold it to the light, make sure I've got it fairly, got that border fairly even on there, which I do. And I am going to stamp this ornament in this bow. I'm going to start off by stamping the bow, and I'm going to do that in red. I'm going to stamp that right towards the top. And now I just have to find my little mask for that so I can mask it off. I see it right here in my dish. I always keep this like stuck to the edge of my peg stamp so that I have that whenever I want to mask it. Probably about time for a new one. I think I'm losing the sticky on it. Stick that right down on top. And now I'm going to use this little ornament here with the green. I like to keep going back with the same colors I have been using just so that everything matches. Hopefully that's got enough ink on it. I think that pad might be due for a re-inking. There, so we have a little our little ornament hanging underneath the bow, and I thought it'd be pretty to do a little bit of inking, so I've just got a blue sponge here and some light blue tumbled glass distress ink, and I'm just gonna dab it gently around the edge. Oops, I guess I didn't need so much on my sponge, so I'm starting on the Post-it note and dragging it in so I don't get too much. There, that's pretty. And then I'm just going to take the mask off. You can see how my bow is nice and bright on there. And there we've got a cute little postage stamp. You could write like a price on it, or you could just leave it plain. That's got a lot of definition, so I think I'll probably leave that plain. And the other embellishment I want to make is some photo corners. So I've got just a scrap of red paper here. I am just going to punch, I think I'll just punch 2 because I did 4 in the other one, but I think I only want 2 because I want to do something different with my ribbon here. 2 photo corners. And for my ribbon, I'm going to show you a neat little trick. I love this polka dot grosgrain ribbon. You know how I love the grosgrain ribbon because it doesn't fray, so I know it's going to be beautiful as it travels through the mail and off to the recipient, and if it gets kept for you know, for a long time, then it will be really pretty. So what I'm going to do is, this is kind of a fun trick. I am going to make myself a little bow like this, and I'm going to leave quite a long tail, okay? And now I'm going to snip that off. These are not my ribbon scissors, but they're handy. And I am going to tie, I want that in the front because that's where I got my pattern. Okay, and now I'm going to tie this around like that, okay? Tying it out. This is awfully awkward. I do apologize because this is so awkward looking. So I basically made like a little bow, and then I'm tying another piece of ribbon around it. Alright, and I'm going to snip off this. Those are my rubber trimming scissors. They actually work fairly decent for that, for doing that. So basically what I want to do is have this along the bottom of my card, like so. Or maybe do it along the edge. And then I'm going to do my little postage stamp embellishment. I might do that. Maybe I'll do this one like this so I have that postage stamp kind of like it's the pot that the tree is sitting in. And then I've got this around the edge and I can tie it on the inside. So I think that's going to look really, really pretty. So I'm going to start by adhering down my panel here. And then my little, I'm going to do, you know what, if I'm going to do the red there, I think I'll do my 2 photo corners here and here then, because I was going to have the ribbon go across the top and have my photo corners up here on those 2 corners, but I'm changing my tune now. So these can be a little difficult to adhere because you don't have very much room to glue, so what I do is I stick them on, and then I use a fine tip applicator to put a little bit of glue on the back, just like that. I put enough that it's going to seep in between my layers of cardstock, and I give it a good squish so that it can all get in there. And you do have to hold it for a few minutes until the glue sets, but that's not a real big deal. Just get both sides glued and then just hold them for a couple minutes, like so, until it dries. Alright, that should be dry enough. Now to make my ribbon stay put, I'm actually going to do a row of adhesive right along that edge. And I am going to put this so that I have the polka dot side up. Once you get this stuck down, you can fuss with it a little bit and then put a little dab of stronger glue under the knot so that it doesn't come undone, because this is not as strong as a regular bow. You have to keep that in mind, and you have to accommodate for that. So once you, because if you pull too hard on your two ends, you're going to end up pulling your bow out, because it's not a real knot, it's not a real bow. So we have to just kind of accommodate for that. I actually kind of wish I pushed it back a little bit further, but I think just get on the edge of that adhesive. I just don't want it covering up too much of my stamped panel there. But luckily you can fuss with it a bit with the adhesive there. That's ATG adhesive gun adhesive. And that just gives us a nice little texture. And then on the inside, we can do a little bit more of that tape. It's a little bit flatter than trying to get a bow on there, and so it's not going to cost extra postage. If I do another knot on there, it's going to make it thick, I think. And look at that. That was just about perfect. It doesn't look that messy. I don't feel like I have to line it or cover that up. If this bothers you that you don't have both loops of the bow sitting on top of the ribbon, you could just stick like a button on there or something like that. It will make it a little thicker and it might increase postage, but that's something that you can do. And now I'm going to use a little foam tape, which I don't think is thick enough to increase the postage. And we're going to stick that right down there. And there is that quick Christmas card idea. I know it seemed to take a long time, but if you were assembly line making these cards, it really wouldn't be that bad. This is how I did the other one. I just put, basically, a lot of times what I'm doing is when I'm putting a card together, I kind of say, okay, what do I need? Where is there a gap? Where do I need something? And that's how I got the idea to make the little postage stamp there. And so for here, I thought, well, it'd look cute if that tree was in a pot. And, you know, you just basically balance it out and figure out where you want your different elements, where it's going to improve the look of the entire piece. And you can change it up a little bit, especially if you're making like a dozen of these. You could try some with your ribbon on the bottom, some with the top, some with just a bow. You know, play with it and, you know, learn about your craft, because that's how you become a better stamper. Again, I want to show you this other example that I made with the cute apples here. There's a couple really gorgeous stamps. There's Fruit Wreath, Great Border, and Eden that have gorgeous fruit to stamp that would be really good. And with this really big stamp that would be too big for a card, you'd think, but if you use a portion of it, it is perfect. And then I just took some scraps and layered them in to make this panel a little longer to make a bookmark. So, you know, use what you have, look at your stamps, think of different creative ways you can combine them to get more ideas. And if you have never embossed before, you know what? Try some red and green embossing powder this holiday season. Maybe some gold. Gold is great for year round. Slowly build your collection if you enjoy using them. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy any more. But it's kind of fun to try something different that can really make your stamping stand out. I remember I started with clear, and because I already had a bunch of different colors of pigment ink, you can stamp with whatever pigment ink you have, and then sprinkle over the clear, and then it will look like you have raised green ink or red ink or yellow ink, whatever color ink you're using. So, you know, that's an affordable way to do it. If you want to make sure you have, like, you want to be able to stamp things on top like we did here, then you will want an opaque embossing powder, just so you don't see like the tree branches underneath. But don't worry about it being absolutely perfect. You know, try maybe just a bottle of black, a pot of black embossing powder. Do your sentiment. You know, maybe that's all you want to do, or you know what, get some gold and you could just stamp Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, Season's Greetings. Do that in the gold, and that will just give you that beautiful touch of sparkle and glitter that's so pretty on holiday cards, and it will help you learn a new technique. I don't want to overwhelm you with too many products or techniques, but I want to show you how they work together to create some really fun effects. I hope you found this useful. This is definitely a stamp school episode digging into a product you might not be familiar with, and I hope you found it helpful. I hope you check out our sponsor, pegstamps.com. That is the home of rubber stamp tapestry. Use the coupon code TREES if you are placing an order, so you can save 10% off your order of mounted stamps. All the details are in the video description, and also links to the products that I used. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Until next time, happy crafting.